It's a cicada crazy year. Maybe you've heard about the cicadas that have come out in 2024. They might have made the news once or twice. You might have heard that this is a rare occasion, only seen every 100 years or so. But is it so special? It seemed so special that I dragged my wife and my 1-year-old son out on a long camping trip across the country to go look at them. And while we had a great time being out there, catching bugs, looking at frogs, being out in nature, I have to wonder, was it worth the plane ticket? Is 2024 really special? And if so, why? Did I just waste a bunch of money? Or was it really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see these cicadas? To answer this question, we need to start as broad as we possibly can go. Answer what is a cicada, and then get down into what happened in 2024. Cicadas all throughout the world belong to a superfamily called Cicadioidea, which is a group within the hemipterans. Like all hemipterans, they have sucking mouthparts. These mouthparts, known as a rostrum, are located at the back of the head. If we take a look at them under the scope, we'll see a few more features. The location of the rostrum towards the rear of the head, and the short conical antenna, the 3 tarsal segments, put Cicadioidea within the Achernorhyncha suborder. Cicadioidea itself is characterized by the triangular placement of the ocelli, the large clear wings held over the abdomen in a tent-like fashion, and a pair of tymbals males use to make sounds that attract females. Cicadioidea itself can be divided into 2 families: the Ptetragracidae and the Cicadidae. Ptetragracidae, or the hairy cicadas, are some strange cicadas. Unfortunately, I do not have any in my collection, but I'd love to get them. Their heads look like they've been caught in some shrink ray, and they are extremely hairy. This, combined with the fact that they sit basal to all other cicadas and were once more widespread, really make them seem like the caveman of cicadas. This once majorly diverse group of cicadas are now only found in the Australian region and are represented by 2 species. They diverged or separated from Cicadidae in the late Triassic or early Jurassic, and we know this primarily because fossils of both families have been found throughout the Jurassic period. Cicadidae is probably the cicadas that you're most familiar with. These are the true cicadas. They have broad heads with eyes that are widely spaced apart. They also have more developed or more complex tymbals that are found only on the males, whereas in the hairy cicadas they're found on both males and females. Because true cicadas have more highly developed tymbals, they are some of the loudest insects on the planet. The loudest is the shrill thorn tree cicada, which reaches 107 decibels, which is about the same pitch as a power saw or a power mower. This can cause hearing loss after prolonged exposure over a short distance. Cicadas spend most of their time living underground, attached to the roots of trees. When they are ready, the alien-looking juveniles slowly dig their way out of the ground. They find a vertical surface to hang from, and they go through a process known as ecdysis. Ecdysis is when an arthropod sheds its old exoskeleton for a new one. This is sometimes incorrectly referred to as molting, but it's a lot different from an animal shedding its fur or scales. The nymphs look somewhat like this. And if you watched our raptorial limbs video, you know that they made an honorable mention for their digging claws. After ecdysis, the newly emerged adult will need to harden its soft exoskeleton through a process called tanning. This can take several hours, but after it is finished, the insect is now ready to reproduce. After mating, the female will use her ovipositor, a structure used across all insects to lay their eggs. A female cicada will use her ovipositor to dig into a tree branch to lay her eggs. While we were out in Illinois, I actually cut a branch off that cicadas were ovipositing on. Let's take a look at it under the scope. Looking at these slits, you can tell that these ovipositors are sharp, and at the end of these slits, there's an egg somewhere down in there. As you can imagine, cutting into tree bark again and again and again to lay these eggs would produce a lot of wear and tear on these ovipositors. To reduce that wear and tear, Cicadas actually fuse metals into the ovipositor. These metals were accumulated while they were just nymphs, and a total of 14 different metals have been found within the cicada ovipositor. These metals include iron, zinc, and magnesium. After some time inside the branches of the tree, little cicadas will hatch out of those eggs, drop to the ground, and burrow down and attach to the roots to start the cycle all over again. Someday, I would really like to dig into all the rich diversity of different mating strategies to different ecologies that all the species of cicadidae have. If you'd like to see something like that, let me know in the comments below. But for now, let's continue making our way towards the stars of 2024. There's just a few more things that we need to clarify before we get there. So if you remember, we have our superfamily Cicadioidea, which is found within Achernorhyncha, which is found within the order Hemipteran. Now we're going to divide our family Cicadidae into 3 different groups. These groups are not taxonomical groups, meaning they're not monophyletic. These species have convergently evolved different traits that make them similar. Therefore, these groups could be considered more of ecological groups, but they definitely help us when talking about cicadas as a whole. The first group is the annual cicadas. As the name suggests, these cicadas come out every year, but it does not mean that these cicadas, like this cicada here, only live a single year, or that their life cycle is a single year. Many of these species will spend 1 to 5 years under the ground before they emerge. Their emergence is just staggered so that some members of the population are coming out every single year. The second group of cicadas is the proto-periodical cicadas. These cicadas have a similar lifespan to the annual cicadas, but instead of staggering their life cycles, they have synchronized their emergence with rainfall. They only emerge when a specific amount of rain has fallen over a specific period of time. For example, one species measures the amount of rain that has fallen over the past 6 years. When the amount reaches 1,181 millimeters, that's when they emerge. How amazing is that they're tracking it for over 6 years? They are literally living rain gauges. This group, the proto-periodical cicadas, have only recently really been figured out, and so a lot of our knowledge is bound to change as more information comes out. The species that are currently considered proto-periodical cicadas are bound to change, as more species of annual cicadas that seem weird might be moved over to the proto-periodicals. The last group of cicadas is what we're all here for, the periodical cicadas. This is the only group that is monophyletic. It's all contained in a single genus, the magic cicada, which is the coolest genus name ever. The magic cicadas have synchronized their emergence so that they all come out at the same time, overwhelming the predators so that they have a better chance of mating, laying their eggs before they're eaten. Unlike the other groups that we've talked about, magic cicada have the longest life cycles, 13 or 17 years. Notice that 13 and 17 are both prime numbers. It is thought that it's hard for animals to produce a life cycle on a prime number. So these cicadas settling on a prime number might be a way of avoiding other animals synchronizing their life cycles to theirs. Now there are individuals that either come out earlier or later than they were supposed to. Usually they're off by a year, but if they're in the 17-year cicada group, they'll emerge 4 years early, and if they're in the 13-year group, they may emerge 4 years late. Do you see what's happening here? One hypothesis is that individuals emerging 4 years early or 4 years late are what gave us the 2 different groups, the 17s and the 13 years. And as we get into the species, you'll notice that this hypothesis holds a lot of weight. There are really 3 distinct morphotypes in each group, and those morphotypes match up together. Again, we'll see that as we get into the species. When these cicadas come out, there are a ton of them. They slowly dig their way out from underground where they spent the last 17 years feeding on the roots of trees. When we were in Illinois, just outside our little KOA cabin, we saw their holes, literally thousands of them. As adults, they only live 2 or 3 weeks before they die blanketing the ground with their dead bodies. This blanket of dead bodies slowly decomposes, returning a bunch of nutrients back to the trees that they were feeding on, and giving a much needed boost to those trees. The amount of insects in such a short amount of time really provides a big boost to the ecosystems in which they emerge. Animals all over experience a gorging frenzy as they eat as many of these insects as they possibly can. Parasites of the cicadas do particularly well during this boom. The large cicada killer wasps will catch cicadas mid-flight and use their venom to paralyze the cicadas. Later, the wasp larva will eat the cicada alive within the wasp burrows. You know, typical wasp behavior. The coolest parasite, though, is a fungus. Mesospora cicadina. This fungus specializes only in the periodical cicadas. This fungus enters the cicada's abdomen and slowly digests it away, eating up the reproductive organs, the digestive system, and even the respiratory system. All what's left is nothing. It literally takes away the entire abdomen. However, it keeps the cicada alive for as long as possible. And even without a reproductive system, the fungus gives off hormones that make the cicadas even more sex crazy than before. The sex drive being ramped up will mean that these cicadas will try to mate with as many individuals as possible. Males will even pretend to be females to get other males infected and then spread those to other females. How amazing is life on this planet? The white fungus on the back of these cicadas have given them the nickname salt shaker cicadas. Again, while we were in Illinois, we had some of these salt shaker cicadas land on us. One of them, the abdomen is completely gone. It's literally just a flying head and thorax. It's amazing that these things are still alive. But despite how cool it is, I did feel a little bad for them. Now let's talk about these broods that we've been hearing so much about. The brood system is really brilliant in my mind. For several years, scientists tried to track the different populations by designating them by the year of their emergence. But this got a little confusing to track a single population. So in 1907, entomologist Charles Marlott proposed a new system that borrowed certain aspects from several different proposed systems. Starting in 1893, Marlott assigned each year a Roman numeral, 1 through 17, for 17 years for the 17-year species, and each group was referred to as a brood. There are 3 species of the 17-year cicadas, and they usually come out in every single brood, with a few exceptions. Also starting in 1893, he assigned the subsequent Roman numerals to each year for 13 years. Roman numerals from 18 to 30. These broods contain 4 species of the periodical cicadas. All 4 usually make an appearance in every brood here as well. All of this makes 30 different broods and 7 different species total. Now you may have heard that 2024 is special because there's 2 broods emerging at the same time. But there are a couple of things you may have noticed about my brood explanation that would make it seem like 2024 is not very special at all. First off, with this system being every single year, somewhere in the United States there should be a brood emerging somewhere. Secondly, every time a 13-year cicada is emerging, you should have another brood of 17-year cicadas emerging as well, since they were overlapped purposely. One on a 17-year cycle and one on a 13-year cycle. It would be impossible to actually get any broods to not emerge with another brood. So while it is true that 2 broods should be emerging every year, according to the Marlott system, we don't see that. Why? That's because 4 of the 17-year broods and 9 of the 13-year broods never even existed. When Marlott made his cicada broods, many of them were theoretical and found later, but these 13 broods were never found. In addition, brood 11 was last seen in 1954 and is assumed to be extinct. Brood 21 went extinct even before the brood system was put into place and was last seen in 1870. In fact, Marlott, in his paper where he proposed the brood system, mentioned that several of the broods appeared to be in decline. One of those broods was brood 11. Despite missing a total of 15 broods, we still use the Marlott classification system for its convenience and simplicity. Another thing to keep in mind when considering the specialness of 2024, that broods are based off of the populations. And the populations of the 13 versus 17-year cicadas rarely, if ever, overlap. Some of these geographic distributions can actually be very small. With 15 broods missing and small geographic ranges on some of these broods, it can seem like years between hearing about the periodical cicada emergences. And this is why when the periodical cicadas emerge around large cities, the media picks up on it really fast. So is 2024 special? The answer is actually yes, and there's several reasons for that. The emergence of two broods is not that unheard of. However, the emergence of the same two broods, a specific brood of 17-year cicadas and a specific brood of the 13-year cicadas, emerging at the same time is rare, about 220 years or so. One of the broods that were out this year was brood 19. This brood has the largest distribution of any of the broods, cutting through most of the eastern US and through several major cities. This brood also contains all 4 species of the 13-year cicadas. The other brood, brood 13, contains the most individuals of cicadas emerging at the same time. It also contains all 3 species of 17-year cicadas. The last thing that makes 2024 special is that these broods, in some places, actually do overlap. And one of those places was Central Illinois. So this is one of the few years that you could actually go to a single place and, with not too much travel, collect all 7 species. While we were there, we really wanted to make sure that we were getting the different species, because they are hard to tell apart if you don't know what brood they came from. To ensure that, we made sure to travel 2 hours into each of the brood's territories before collecting those cicadas. This ensured that we were collecting the correct species with little mix-ups. Well, at least we hope so. All of these factors combined to make entomologists really excited, and the general public caught on to that. I don't know if the general public will find 2024 as special as entomologists, but entomologists sure found it special. And of course, whenever insects make it into the news, it's always better than the politics, right? So let's talk more about bugs. For the last little bit of this video, because I've already rambled long enough, let's talk about the species. How do you identify them, and how are they distinguished from each other? It's actually quite difficult, especially if you don't know what brood they came from. And this usually isn't a problem because they're emerging at different times anyway, and far apart from each other. But this year made it a little bit more challenging. Anyway, I did make a simple key that I would like to walk you through right now. Most of the identification is done looking at the sterni, which are the segments found underneath the abdomen. So I have what I think are all 7 species in this box here. We'll look at these one at a time and see what we come up with. The first step, or couplet, separates the cicadas that have orange sternites versus no color on the sternites. Taking a glance at all the specimens, we see that we can separate 2 individuals into the Cassini grouping, while the rest are going to go to couplet 3. To separate these 2 dark individuals, we need to know what brood they belong to. Because I know where I collected each, I know that this is supposed to be a 17-year cicada, making it Magic Cicada cassini, while this is the 13-year Magic Cicada tricassini. Let's go back to these other ones that were left on couplet 3, that had the orange sternites. Are the orange stripes broad or narrow? Again, taking a glance, these 2 have less orange, while these 3 have a lot more, putting these 2 in the decula group. Once again, we need to separate by brood. This one is the 17-year Magic Cicada septendecula, while this is a 13-year Magic Cicada tridecula. Supposedly there is less orange on the Magic Cicada septendecula, but across all the ones I collected, I can't notice this difference. We have 3 cicadas left on couplet 5. If the abdomen is almost entirely orange, then it is Magic Cicada tridecium, a 13-year cicada, which this individual meets most of the criteria. This example that I have right here, the Magic Cicada tridecium, I believe that's what this is. But again, I've seen pictures of them being more orange than this and even less orange than this, so I'm not really sure. Again, color is rarely a good feature to distinguish species. Individual variation is just too great. If the striping is apparent but thick, we move to couplet 6, where once again we need to separate them by brood. This one is Magic Cicada septendecium, which is a 17-year cicada, and this is Magic Cicada neotradecium, which is a 13-year cicada. Another good way to identify these cicadas is through their song. But once again, you run into the same problem where they're grouping off in the same areas, where the songs sound similar, and therefore you need to know what brood is emerging at that time in your area. And that goes back to that point of the early emergences or late emergences evolving into one another. Each of these species, as you've seen, look pretty indistinguishable from each other, and even have the same song characteristics. It is very likely and very well supported that these groups probably evolved into each other by emerging 4 years early or 4 years late, depending on what brood it is. Overall, this trip was worth every penny to see this big boom. I never experienced so many insects in one place before. It was truly amazing. And while I left Illinois with a little less hearing in my ears, it was worth it every bit. Now you know all you need to know about the 2024 cicadas, plus a little extra that you probably didn't want to know. And now, you can be a cicada expert too.